Welcome to the Cinderella Show. It is Black History Month, and we are back. So yeah, we're just gonna continue it on with some more stories from African American Folktales. Hopefully, at some point, I can find my book. Wish me luck. Today's story is John Outwits Mr. Berkeley. This story begins with a very covetous man, Mr. Berkeley, one who was very rich and a very selfish man too. Everything he saw, he wanted. One day, he met an old woman who had a fine cow she was taking to the market. He knew it was worth about $100, but he said to the woman, "You don't want to take that cow all the way to the market. I will give you $5 for it right here." Not knowing much about the value of anything, the old woman thought that $5 was a lot of money. So Mr. Berkeley got the cow. When she got home, she told her only son, whose name was John, what she had done. He said, "Damn, Mommy, Mr. Berkeley really paid you nothing, close to what that cow was worth. But I'm going to make Mr. Berkeley really do a flying dance for what he has done to us." So he made a plan. His mother had a nice bucket in the house filled with some good-looking sugar. John went and got some cow manure and other shit and put it into the bottom of a pan, and then covered that over with the sugar. He carried it down that same road that his mother was taking the cow earlier, knowing that was where Mr. Berkeley passed all of the time. When Mr. Berkeley saw John and all that nice sugar, he asked him, "John, what do you have on your shoulder there?" John said, "Sugar, Mr. Berkeley. Some nice sugar to sell at the market." Mr. Berkeley came over to him and said, "Well, that's pretty good looking sugar. Why don't you sell it to me instead of carrying it all the way to the market?" John said, "Well, I want $500 for it." Well, Mr. Berkeley, when he saw something that he really liked, he just had to have it. So he paid him the $500 for the pan. He carried it on home and invited all his friends to come and have tea with him so they could taste this wonderful sugar that he had found. They came and thought the sugar was just wonderful in their tea. After using the sugar for a few days, though, Mr. Berkeley dipped in his spoon and it came up smelling awful. He said, "Good God, I'm going to beat that John when I catch up with him." And he took off from John's house right away. Well, John had thought out the whole plan. He had taken a large copper boiling pot that they used for making sugar, filled it with yams and potatoes and other provisions from the garden. He balanced the whole thing on 3 stones and built a large fire under the pot and began to boil the whole thing down. But there was one spot where the fire was so hot it showed through all the covering of ashes, which he covered over with fresh dirt. As soon as Mr. Berkeley got there, he called out to John, and John answered, "I'm in here, Mr. Berkeley." And before Mr. Berkeley could say anything, John said, Mr. Berkeley, come and see this pot that cooks food by itself." He hit the kettle as hard as he could with a whip, and he said, "Mr. Berkeley, just listen to that." Sure enough, the kettle was boiling. He hit it again, and the kettle seemed to boil even harder. Mr. Berkeley didn't have to hear the third crack of the whip when he said, "You have to sell me that pot that cooks food by just lashing it." John said, "Well, I have to have $500 for the pot and another $500 for the special whip." So Mr. Berkeley gave it to him, $500 for the pot and $500 for the whip. So he took it to this large field, put the pot on these stones, and brought lots of food to put into it. Then he invited all his friends to do a great big cook-up to show them how he was going to boil food without any fire. So all the friends came bright and early, before they had eaten their food at home even, expecting to have a big feast at Mr. Berkeley's. Well, when they got there, they saw Mr. Berkeley taking this whip and hitting the pot. Whop! He gave it a hard lash, but nothing happened. He gave the pot 100 lashes, and still the water stayed as cold as before. He was disappointed and getting mad now. And all his friends left, hungry and laughing at the same time. Now John went on to the next part of his plan. He killed a goat and took out its heart and had his mother put it inside of her dress, right on top of where her own heart was. He told her to play dead when he touched it with a knife. As soon as he saw Mr. Berkeley coming to him, as vexed as he could be, he took out a knife and he stabbed his mother right in the goat's heart, and she fell over. Now, Mr. Berkeley supposed she was dead. Mr. Berkeley said, "John, you have killed your mother." He was scared, with the knife in John's hand and the blood all around. John said, "Oh, Mr. Berkeley, Mama will raise herself up once more. You'll see." So he took up this shell and he blew on it. His mother stirred a little. He blew it again. His mother opened her eyes. The third time he blew, she sat up. And the fourth time, she got up and started walking around. Mr. Berkeley was astonished. He asked, "John, what do you want for a knife that cuts like that?" John said, "Well, I have to have $500. So he gave John the money and 500 more for the shell. Now, he went home, got all his servants, his wife and his children, put them all in a row. Again, he invited all his friends over to see how he was going to kill all these people and then bring them back to life again. He took the knife and stabbed his wife and she fell dead. He took all the servants and killed them, and the rest of his family, they were all dead on the ground in front of him. So he blew on the shell. And nothing happened. He blew again and again from morning to night, but nobody came back to life. He looked around and said, "All right, I am going to kill John with just one stab too, for God's sake." This time, John had no other tricks, so Mr. Berkeley tied him up, wanting to shame John like John had shamed him in front of all his friends. He brought him up to the bayside, to the rum shop there, and started to have a drink with all his friends while they laughed at John, all tied up there. But another man, whose name was Wolf, passed by there. He saw John crying and said to him, "Friend John, how did you get yourself in this fix?" John said, "I have discovered this huge gold field under the water on Mr. Berkeley's property. And you know how he is, being so selfish. So he has tied me up until he can get all that gold and split it up between us." Wolf said, "But it seems so cruel that you should be tied." And John said, it is. But Mr. Berkeley, he must have his gold. Maybe if I told you where the gold is, you want to have my half of it?" Wolf said, "Would you do that?" And John said, "Yes, because he is making so much fun of me in front of his friends." So Wolf unloosened the ropes and they exchanged clothes. And John tied him up just as tightly as he had been tied. So John went away and left Wolf there in his place. When Mr. Berkeley came out of the rum shop later, he just picked up Wolf without looking and carried him out to his boat and went out onto the open sea and shoved Wolf over and drowned him. About 3 months later, Mr. Berkeley saw John coming toward him in a carriage he had taken when he changed places with Mr. Wolf. He said, "Is that you, John?" And John said, "Oh, yes, Mr. Berkeley." He asked, "Well, how did you come back to life and get such a fine carriage?" John said, "Well, you remember when you threw me into the sea? Well, I fell right into a gold field itself." Mr. Berkeley said to John, "You have to show me where this gold field is. Will you do that for me?" John said, "Yes, but you must give me something in return." Mr. Berkeley said he would give him anything he wanted. John said, "Well, but it is deep in the ocean, and you must put weights on your body so you can get down to it." So John tied Mr. Berkeley as tightly as Mr. Berkeley had tied him, put some stones on his body, and put him in the boat. He went out on the open sea and shoved him over. That's the gold mine Mr. Berkeley wanted. But now John had all the things that Mr. Berkeley had, and John was alive too. That's the reason why an envious and covetous man always loses when he tries to get too much. And this is by Elsie Cluse Parsons from Folklore of the Antilles, French and English, told in Trinidad. The tale about John and Mr. Berkeley gives us a kaleidoscope twist on John and Old Master stories, pitting a clever young man against a man who is covetous, rich, envious, selfish. Although John and Mr. Berkeley are not in a master-slave relationship, their conflicts with an escalating series of punishments repeat what is seen in John and Old Master tales. The scenes of revenge are, in this case, not at all realistic and recall some of the antics of Brer Rabbit as well as European tricksters and swindlers. The tale's origins can be traced to fatal deception tales in Africa as well as to stories about two farmers, one rich and dim-witted, the other poor and resourceful. Thank you all so much for joining Mr. Gentle. Hope you enjoyed today's stories. And if you would like Mr. Gentle to read a story to you, if you would like to hire Mr. Gentle as a voice actor or narrator, please email the Simba Luna Show, and we'll see you soon.